Happy Thanksgiving, everyone. It's one of the best days of the year, filled with food, family, and perhaps best of all, football. It's a holiday that's rooted in tradition. After the Macy's Thanksgiving Day Parade takes the streets of New York, it's time to watch the Detroit Lions play. And once the Lions game finishes, we flip the channel and watch the Dallas Cowboys take the field. It's been that way seemingly forever, and it's hard to imagine a time when the Dallas Cowboys weren't playing on Thanksgiving. But for 2 years in the 1970s, amazingly enough, this was the case. For 2 years, the NFL decided to replace the Cowboys with the St. Louis Cardinals. And this experiment failed miserably. This is the story of how the Cardinals, and not the Cowboys, were the annual Thanksgiving team for a period of time, and how this decision ended up backfiring in a big way. Now, believe it or not, there was a time where teams didn't want to play on Thanksgiving. It seems weird nowadays, considering the fact that the Thanksgiving games are traditionally the highest rated games of the season. But prior to the merger, we looked at the possibility of playing games on Monday night, which no network at the time wanted to take on. I'll leave a link in the description if you want to see the history behind that. And in 1966, he looked at the possibility of playing 2 games on Thanksgiving. The Lions had played at home on Thanksgiving every single year since 1945, so their games were practically tradition at this point. But when it came time for a second game, no other team wanted to take a chance. The main reason? There was a fear that nobody would show up for the game. Would people be willing to change their annual Thanksgiving plans for a football game? There was precedent behind this. In the rival American Football League, they had played a game on Thanksgiving every year, and the attendance of the team that played on Thanksgiving was significantly lower than their average attendance. In the first 6 seasons of the AFL, the Thanksgiving attendance was lower than the average attendance on 5 occasions. And in the case of the 1962 Broncos, their attendance on Thanksgiving was roughly 50% of what they had averaged for every other game. It was perfectly understandable at the time as to why no team wanted to play on Thanksgiving for that second game. And when the league was shopping this idea around, there was only one owner who was interested in this possibility. That, as you might be able to guess, was Tex Schramm of the Dallas Cowboys. He saw an opportunity to play in front of a national audience when there was nothing else on television. But there was no guarantee that the game was going to draw big crowds. In fact, Commissioner Rozelle guaranteed the Cowboys a minimum gate revenue just in case the team couldn't sell enough tickets. The result of that first ever Cowboys game on November 24th, 1966? Not only did the Cowboys defeat the Cleveland Browns by a final score of 26-14, but they did so in front of their largest crowd of the season at the Cotton Bowl. There were 80,259 fans who packed into the stadium on that day. Their average attendance on the season outside of that game was a really strong number of over 65,000. And yet, on Thanksgiving, they got over 15,000 more fans into the stadium than they typically did. In fact, this wasn't just their largest crowd of the season, but at the time of their game, this was their largest crowd of all time. So the Cowboys game was a success, and the Dallas game on Thanksgiving continued to be a success year after year. Each year, the Cowboys would draw eyeballs to television sets when they played the late afternoon game, and each year, the Cowboys would pack their home stadium when it came time to play the game. And 1 decade later, after everyone else wanted nothing to do with playing on Thanksgiving, all of a sudden, everyone wanted a piece of the pumpkin pie.
How can you make money with such a stupid idea?
And how can you not make money with such a brilliant idea?
SpongeBob SquarePants is one of my all-time favorite shows, as I'm sure is the case with a lot of people who grew up around my time. So if I get the opportunity to make a SpongeBob reference, I'm gonna do it. And it seems really fitting here. Remember the episode of SpongeBob where SpongeBob has an idea and creates Pretty Patties, and Mr. Krabs laughs in his face, calling it one of the worst ideas he's ever heard? and then SpongeBob decides to sell the patties, they become a massive success, and then Mr. Krabs wants in on the business? Well, in this scenario, Mr. Krabs is the St. Louis Cardinals. In 1966, when the idea of the second Thanksgiving game was being pitched around, everyone, including the Cardinals, shot it down. But now that the Cowboys proved that the game was successful, the Cardinals wanted in, and they thought that it was unfair that the Cowboys seemingly had an advantage in playing on Thanksgiving every single year. The formula wasn't broke. The Cowboys took a gamble, it paid off, and their games were wildly popular. But despite this, Commissioner Pete Rozelle listened to the Cardinals' complaints and decided to fix this. And in 1975, allowed the Cardinals and Cowboys to alternate home games on Thanksgiving. Under this scenario, the Cardinals would play at home in odd-numbered years, and the Cowboys would play at home in even-numbered years. Now in 1974, the year before this took effect, the Cardinals were one of the best teams in the NFL. They were exciting to watch. 9 of their 14 games were decided by 1 possession, and 8 of their 14 games were decided by 4 points or less. They went 10-4, and they won the NFC East, making it to the playoffs for the first time since 1948. They had a bunch of recognizable Pro Bowlers on their roster, including quarterback Jim Hart, halfback Terry Metcalf, wide receiver Mel Gray, and cornerback and future Hall of Famer Roger Worley. They wanted to play on Thanksgiving, and they were an exciting team to watch heading into 1975. So in that regard, I guess the move made some sense. But when the time came in 1975 for the Cards to play on Thanksgiving, it was an absolute disaster both on and off the field. They end up losing badly to the Bills by a final score of 32-14. But it should be noted that the Cards scored a garbage time touchdown late in the fourth quarter when the score was 32-7 and the game was well out of reach. And as we all know, 25-point deficits are impossible to come back from. Off the field, it was more of the same. In their other 6 home games that season, the Cardinals averaged over 46,000 fans per game. In their Thanksgiving game against the Bills, they drew under 42,000. They drew their smallest attendance of the season. The Cardinals moved into Busch Stadium 2 in 1966, and in their decade of playing games there at the time, the Thanksgiving game against the Bills was their smallest crowd ever in the month of November. When the Cards got their second opportunity at hosting a Thanksgiving game in 1977, it was more of the same. The attendance improved, they drew over 50,000 fans into the stadium that day, but the on-field result was the same. They got destroyed by the Dolphins 55-14, with the Dolphins leading 48-7 at the end of the third quarter. The television ratings for these games, as you might expect, were disasters. While no official numbers are available, the ratings were supposedly significantly worse for the Cards' Thanksgiving games than they were for the Cowboys' Thanksgiving games. It also didn't help St. Louis that the Cards had received significant backlash from the city for playing on Thanksgiving. There was a big high school football game played on Thanksgiving every single year known as the Kirkwood-Webster Groves Turkey Day Game, and this game has been played every year since 1898. The game draws thousands upon thousands of fans each year, and there was lots of resistance behind the Cardinals playing on Thanksgiving and messing up this tradition. When the Cardinals played on Thanksgiving, a lot of fans felt like Peppermint Patty in the Charlie Brown Thanksgiving special. Where's the turkey? Where's the mashed potatoes? Where's the Dallas Cowboys? It didn't feel like Thanksgiving. The games were disasters. And after 1977, the NFL called off their plan for the Cardinals and Cowboys to alternate Thanksgiving games. And the Cowboys accepted this deal on one condition. The condition was that they would get to play on Thanksgiving forever. And over 40 years later, I don't think that deal is getting broken anytime soon. The NFL tried switching it up by taking America's team off of television during Thanksgiving, and the move failed. Other teams who want in on Thanksgiving action now have the chance to do so, as in 2006, the league added a third game in prime time. When the Rams were in St. Louis, they never played one of these games. And the Cardinals have not hosted a Thanksgiving game since, though they have been the road team 4 times since 1975. They lost all 4 of those games, most recently against the Eagles in 2008. Today, the Dallas Cowboys are a staple of many American Thanksgivings. Last year, in their game against Washington, they drew an audience of over 30 million viewers, which was by a fairly large margin the most viewed regular season game of the year. And I'm going to take a wild guess and say that their game against the Bills will be the most watched regular season game of 2019. This year, and for many, many years into the future, people will turn on their television sets on Thanksgiving and see the Dallas Cowboys on their screens. But imagine a universe where instead, people were doing this for the Cardinals. Because for 2 years in the 1970s, this was the case.